talking to my neighbor yesterday, telling me his Jeep needs brakes. So I told him I'd give him a hand, so here we are. He got all the parts. He wants me to go ahead and go through the Jeep and just do it all up. So we're going to be replacing brake rotors and brake pads. And that's pretty much it. So let's get out there and get to work in this heat. As you can see, I got the vehicle jacked up. It's a nice green, by the way. Safety stands in place. And here's your front brakes. Does not look bad at all. Rotor looks fine. And the brake pads has quite a bit to go before he purposely needs to replace them. So I'm going to go ahead and text him and see what he wants me to do. If he wants me to just go ahead and replace them or not. Alright, so this is the rear brakes right here. Tires off, obviously. Jack stand, blah, blah, blah. This is your caliper. Brake pads all low on this back side. It's almost grinding. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the screwdriver between the caliper and the rotor. Then we're just going to pull it towards us, or towards me, till I collapse that piston back into the caliper. Once that's done, just play with the caliper, push it back and forth, see if it's binding up in any spots, see if it moves smoothly. What you want is you want it to move back and forth smoothly without binding. And everything looks good. So we're going to take the caliper bolts off. 1, 2. We're going to use a wrench on the inside nut. What happens is I already tried to loosen these. Sometimes you got to hold the inside stud to take off the bolt. And because we're going to be doing the rotor on this also, I'm taking everything off. Or I have to take everything off. That caliper comes out. Don't let it hang off the hose. Just put it somewhere where it holds it. It can just hold up so it don't hang off the hose. Take out the pads. This one's not too bad, but it is close to grinding. The other one is though. It was making a lot of squeak noises and stuff. Yeah, it's in rough shape. Alright, to take this caliper mount off, there's 2 bolts here, one here, and one here. There's not enough room in here to get a my impact wrenches and stuff, so I'm gonna have to do this by hand with a couple of wrenches. I'm gonna pull this pin out, get it out of the way, and pull this pin out, get that out of the way. Those are the caliper pins that we removed the caliper from. And this is gonna be really, really tight, so but once it breaks free, it should come right out. Hey, caliper bracket comes off. Set it aside. Now you got your rotor right here. The tricky part is going to be taking this thing off. Alright, if your vehicle is brand new and it's never had brakes done before, or rotors replaced, you're going to see clips. Yep, most vehicles have 3 clips on the rotor. This one happens to have 4. You're going to take some diagonal pliers and you're just going to rip these things off. Just like that. So you pull on the edge, on one of the edges, pull it out, and cut it. Don't even bother trying to save this stuff. You're not putting it back on. You gotta have the emergency brake off, make sure that's off. This obviously is not gonna pop off by itself. It's all pretty much welded itself on as it rusts. So we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to put some penetrating fluid on this here, and I'm going to get a hammer and see if we can bang this off. Sometimes tapping it a few times will be enough. We'll give it enough vibration to get it to pop right off. But definitely if you have penetrating fluid for this kind of application, or rusty bolts and stuff, that's the way to go. I got myself a good sized hammer, and we're going to whack this thing a little bit. And since we're replacing this rotor, it doesn't matter if you damage it. I mean, if you were going to reuse this rotor, you don't want to whack it too hard or anything, but we're getting rid of this. We're putting a new one on. So and when you're hitting the rotor, don't hit the studs. You don't want to hit these. You don't want to replace these unless you do. I don't know, but don't hit the studs. You're not going to be able to get this off any further because inside this hub here is the emergency brake system. And what happens over time is there's a ridge that builds up around it of rust. So the shoes, if they're adjusted properly, ain't going to pass that ridge. So we're going to have to go inside behind this is so difficult with the camera. I don't know if you can see this, but there's a rubber boot right here on the back side of the plate. You're going to take that boot out. Now inside here, there's what's called an adjuster for the shoes. And we're going to go in there with a special tool that I have. Looks like a bent screwdriver. And we're going to loosen the shoes up, or unadjust the shoes. And sometimes these things can be frozen. This is the difficult part, is getting this thing to loosen up. And once you get it loosened enough, the rotor should come off. Need a little bit more. And there we go. Alright, so your brake shoe, the emergency shoe, rides right in here. And you could probably see that in here there's a huge rust ridge. And that's what we were trying to pass. So we got to loosen those shoes to get past this ridge, and then you can get this off. Alright, once this is off, you want to check the brake shoes, the emergency brake shoes, make sure everything's good. Make sure both of them are okay. Make sure the springs, everything works. Star adjuster works. We're going to just hit this up real quick. I'm going to use some water just to get the brake dust off of this. You can use brake clean if you want, but I don't feel the need to use brake clean on this. And there's a seal in there for the shaft, and I don't want to, cause any issues with brake clean. I am going to use brake clean just to clean this fine oil they put on here, a light coat of oil, so it don't rust while it's in storage. Don't need a whole lot for that, just enough to get that coating off of there. And don't forget, clean the inside of the hub with the brake shoes hit or ride on. Alright, now we're going to do the outside. And all you're cleaning here really is the surface of where the brake pad actually rides on. That's it. I mean, you want to clean the whole hub and stuff, go ahead, but not necessary. Alright, so we're going to put this on. So this should slide right on. And then I put one nut here just to keep the rotor in place, so it don't move. Now we got to go ahead and adjust those rear brake shoes back to slightly touching on the inside hub. Basically, it's going to be the opposite of what we did. So this time I'm going to move that star adjuster inside there to the outside to adjust these brake shoes. And what that does is it expands and adjusts them. Now you just want them slightly touching the hub. As you're going, you want to check, because you can't over adjust these shoes. Okay, once you think you have it adjusted to where it's slightly touching, put that rubber stop back in there. Alright, kit comes with new hardware, so we're going to pop the old hardware out. And we're going to take the new hardware. And since this car is fairly new, and it's everything looks pretty good, I'm just going to go ahead and put the new stuff on there. Normally I would sand in here and stuff, but this looks really, really good. It's in good shape. Okay, now I'm going to put this bracket back on, right where it was. And like I said, normally I would sand all this stuff down, but you can see this is in great shape, man. Truck only got 50,000 miles on it, and everything looks really good under here. I'll put the bolts back in. Alright, this kit comes with some grease, so I'm not going to use my grease. I'm just lightly going to put some grease on those slides. Not a whole lot, just a little bit. You really don't need a ton of grease here. Alright, the pad with the tab on it, the low patch sensor I should say, goes on the inside, and the tab without the low sensor goes on the outside. Normally I would clean these up. They actually look really good. I am going to throw a little bit of extra grease in there. Good shape, man. You can tell he takes care of his vehicle. Alright, next thing we're going to do is the caliper is going to go on. I'll start the bolt on the top. Once it's in, get the caliper over the pads. So if this piston ain't all the way in, you're going to have to get it all the way in so you can get this caliper back on the pads. I like to use what's called a C-clamp. Makes easy work of it. Alright, so once that's done, you can slide this over the pads, the caliper, and put the last bolt in. Brakes are done on the rear of the Jeep. What is this thing? Wrangler. Unlimited. Woo, nice. Now all you gotta do is put the tire back on and do the same thing for the other side in the rear. A lot of noise out here today with all the people cutting grass and stuff. So I apologize for the video. Noise, whatever you want to call it. You know what? No, I don't apologize. You guys are getting free as damn instructions and I'm gonna apologize.